Hi, I'm Linda and this is Untitled Permaculture. In today's video, we're going to have a quick look around the garden before harvesting some carrots to make some spicy carrot soup. Today we have the sun shining, but it won't be long before my first frost. I have had a first frost on the 6th of May that totally wiped this garden out. Of course, the brassicas did stand up to that frost, but the nasturtium and other flowering plants just were decimated. So today I thought we'd have a look around the garden before there's any damage from a first frost. The first garden bed as you enter my front garden is my garlic patch, which I do have a video on and I'll link it here. And as you can see, the garlic's all starting to come up beautifully. The mustard that I threw in is starting to grow well, and I'm going to leave that to get going. If we get a severe frost, that should all just be destroyed and form a mulch, sort of an organic layer on the surface. If it is a mild winter and the mustard is still growing when I want the garlic to kick in, I'll certainly do a chop and drop and use it as a mulch. In this bed just across from the garlic, I have quite a few of my summer plantings, and I have added in some plants that would be considered more a winter veg garden. Just here is the first of many eggplants. The eggplant fruits are just small at this stage on this particular plant, but there are other plants further on in the garden that I've been harvesting quite a bit from. It's a shame, but these plants will soon be wiped out as soon as the cold hits. Little plants that won't be wiped out when the cold hits are these little volunteer parsnips. I did have a parsnip go to seed just nearby, and I've got heaps of little volunteers. Instead of digging them up as I've done before and failed at growing parsnips, I'm going to just leave those in place if they're not in the way of other plants, that is. In between my summer plantings, I have added in a few Asian greens, including some of this frilly mustard, which looks quite lovely. I've got this beautiful tulsi that's just starting to flower. I'd love to spread those seeds around. And of course the sweet basil, which a lot of it is starting to flower, and I'll let some go to seed as well. But I will be harvesting some when I harvest my eggplants and make ratatouille, because it really goes well with that. Now this one is a long eggplant. I've got a couple of those in the garden. This chilli plant here is one that I actually dug up last season, put it in the greenhouse over winter in a pot, and then put back into the ground. And it's got really decent sized chilies, and I've been harvesting quite a few red chilies off that for making my chili sauce and my fermented relish. These other chilies I haven't really harvested from. They're more kind of a bit of interest and a bit decorative, but perhaps I should harvest some and give it a try. Further along in the garden, I've got some other chili plants which I have grown from seed. That they're mostly just producing the green chilies at this point. They haven't actually ripened up, but what I usually do when there's a frost threatening, I'll come out, grab all these chilies off at whatever size, and then I put them in the freezer, and that's what I use for next season's tomato salsa, because I find the tomatoes are usually ready to be harvested way before any chilies are. So if I've got them in the freezer, I can get going with the recipes that I need them for. Now just here, I've got my celery kicking in nicely. These plants are plants that I transplanted, little volunteer seedlings from another area of the garden. They do take a while to get going, and I keep sneaking off branches off them, which doesn't help them kick in either. But they're really coming into their own now, and I've got more of the celery in the bed over here. This celery is a volunteer plant that I haven't dug up at all, and it's doing really well in amongst some little brassicas that I've put in. These leeks right next to it are volunteers, but the brassicas, with the cooler weather coming, are really looking quite beautiful. Now this little green Maserata cauliflower, it's quite a small little head there, but that's just on a plant that I'd cut off at the root, and this is regrown. So I find that I get quite a lot of cauliflower that way. Just next to that little cauliflower is one of my zucchini plants, which are still producing. And I do find at this time of year, I kind of a little over zucchini, and they do get a bit massive. So I'll be coming through, chopping that one off and feeding that to the chickens. But I'm still getting beautiful sized zucchini, like that one next to it. I don't have many cabbages that are ready to eat in the garden. That is one of them, although I do fear there's some little bugs in there enjoying it ahead of me, so I'll have to grab that one soon. Over here we've got another zucchini. Again, I just pulled that zucchini off just to stop it growing so much so we could get other zucchinis developing. So I'll be coming around and getting those. What I often do at this time of year is get this excess produce and make stock paste, and I'll be showing you how I do that in future videos. Now we've come to what I call my winter garden, although I kind of feel like my whole garden has turned out to be my winter and summer garden. I just sort of throw in different plants in between others and find that that's working quite well. Now in this little garden here, I don't know if you recall, but I had some plants going to seed, and they were very small seeds and I wasn't sure whether they'd be viable. I thought they were beetroot, but turns out they were Swiss chard, and most of them have grown. And what I'm using this for is part of my salad mix. I pick all the young leaves and I can add it to the salad with all my lettuce leaves that I've got spread around this little garden. I've got frilly green lettuce, frilly red lettuce, all these different sorts of Swiss chard that I can add to the salad mix. There's also endive and radicchio that have self-seeded and spread themselves around as well. So there's great variety for my salad mixes at the moment. I've also got self-seeded kale, which when the leaves are really small like this, I also add that to my lettuce mix as well. And also the sorrel, which I just chop off, which encourages just the young fresh leaves, which add a lemony flavour to the salad mix. Here's one of my Tuscan kale, which is starting to look good. It didn't look so great over summer, but with cooler weather, that's when you find your kales really start to kick in. Now just in this bed here, I put in lots of chilies and capsicums and eggplants. Now the chilies aren't too bad and the eggplants are going great, but the capsicums really didn't do any good. I think next year I'll give them a dedicated space and probably feed them up a little bit more as well, just to give them a better chance. They're kind of like snack-sized capsicums. Just here is my cucumber bed. Now I have left some cucumbers on so that they can form seeds and I can save those for next year. But I've still got some fruits coming along. There's one or two plants that are still happy producing while we get some sun and some warmth. As soon as cold conditions come, these plants will just stop. Now moving along to this garden bed, you can really tell the changes of season here. This is my bean trellis and it has finished, and my tomatoes are also nearly finished. Now in this area here, I have been harvesting dry beans to pod and store for winter food, and I've still got a bit to go with that actually. Some of these tomatoes still look quite healthy, but it's getting a bit too late for the fruit to be forming and ripening. This one I might take inside soon, and that should ripen in the house. I do have some plants that have still got piles of fruit on them, and I'm just going to gather those up and feed it to the chickens. That plant was prolific and I got plenty off it. Now as this garden starts to fade and the beans and tomatoes finish, I have been adding in some other little plants. Here I've added in some beetroot, and there's some radicchio and some radishes that are growing in these beds as well, just young plants at the moment. What I'm trying to do is just not leave too many beds bare. If I can just add in little plants in between fading plants, it kind of keeps your garden chuffing away really nicely, and it's better for the soil to have these roots constantly in the ground. Hiding in amongst this nasturtium, you can see there's some basil. I've still got quite a lot of basil in the garden, and it's at this time of year I tend to harvest what's left. If I'm not using it in a recipe like ratatouille, then I do make batches of pesto so I can keep adding beautiful basil flavour to dishes during the year. And there's still a few tomatoes hiding in amongst here. This is a Jean Flamme, beautiful little orange tomato that is very tasty. Just here are 4 of my Tuscan kale that I planted in this tomato bed as part of a mixed planting, just to fill in the garden bed until I got my tomatoes going. But these plants have actually been fantastic, and I've been harvesting off them for months. I anticipate harvesting off them right throughout winter, and they'll probably go to seed in spring. Now this bed here is a bed that I planted quite some time ago. It did include some rosella, which was a bit of an experiment. Now these poor rosellas have already been affected by the cold weather, and I don't think they're going to bloom. They got close but didn't get there, so that was a shame. Maybe I should try it in the greenhouse next time and see if I can get it going, or not bother. But these sprouting broccoli have been going great, and I've been harvesting heaps of sprouts off those. Now something I do like to do midway through summer is replant beans, because it means you get cropping for later on in the season. This is my lovely Ukrainian bean, which is just a beautiful bean to eat. But I've also added in some pea seeds, so I'm getting snow peas as well. In this area I did scatter lettuce seeds and Swiss chard seeds. The Swiss chard are really starting to get going. The lettuce I've already harvested. Now just here I've got my second crop of corn. Now it's the golden bantam corn, a very starchy corn and better for using for soups or throwing in just as kernels into other dishes rather than eating as a sweet corn. But that's just starting to ripen now. In amongst my corn plants, I've interplanted some spinach, which I have been harvesting quite a bit from already. And there's also rocket that's self-seeded and spread itself around, so I'll always look out for that and add it to my salad mixes. This little bed of greens is actually self-seeded rocket as well, so I'll pick that just in handfuls and add it also to salads. Just in this bed here, I've got 2 later plantings of zucchinis. I often find my original plantings have sort of worn out by now, which they haven't, and I add in some more just to ensure that I don't run out of my zucchini, because you do get sick of it, but when it's gone, it's like tomatoes, you just kind of miss it. And just in the middle of the corn and zucchini is this beautiful Swiss chard, which was just a volunteer plant that I let go. Always nice to have this sort of free, easy food in the garden. Now just in this bed here, I've added in lots of brassicas for hopeful winter harvests, and I planted it where I did have some fennel plants that did go to seed, so I'm also growing fennel in this area. Now the fennel is going a bit berserk and it's quite thickly planted, so I will have to thin it out a little bit if I want it to bulb up. And I am thinning it and then using it like a chop and drop, just adding it to the soil surface just to keep that all important organic matter nice and thick. Still haven't harvested these pumpkins. I have been pinching pumpkins from the backyard though, but it won't be too long before we get these. I just don't want to grab them too early. I want them to be really ready to store. The little tendrils are browning off, and I believe that's a sign that they're ready to just about harvest, but they're huge and I'd hate for them to deteriorate in storage because I've grabbed them too early. These 2 pumpkins right at the end grew once the rains came back again in autumn, so I don't know if they will make it, but they'll be good eating still, even if they're not quite there. I suppose I could make a curry or something with them, but compared to the earlier growth, you can tell that should be just about ready for storage. Now we're moving to the end of the garden where I did grow my potatoes in these two beds here. I did replant the potatoes in this second bed, but totally cleared them out of this bed and planted it to winter crops. In here I've planted cauliflowers, cabbages which are just starting to form their head. In the middle of the garden I transplanted leeks from another area of the garden, and they've done really well in this space. Also in this space I've got some volunteer beetroot. I have harvested a few of these beetroot. These ones aren't quite ready yet, but they will be beautiful. They're just growing in the wood chip path. I'm very happy about it. There's another little volunteer in the path. Just in here I have a couple of radishes. This one's a big long purple radish which is probably ready to be harvested. There's some of the red radishes which are probably past it, but I wouldn't mind them seeding and spreading themselves around. This plant is just a random potato that I must have missed. And more cabbages and collies. This is a volunteer sunflower which mightn't form a head. It's going to be getting too cold soon. And just down the end here I have added in some little beetroot plants. Now this garden bed here, I did replant some of my greener potatoes and the ones that were already starting to shoot. And during summer, I didn't water it, so they didn't really grow. And it's only just in autumn, once we've got the wet conditions again, that the plants have started to grow. Now, they mightn't make it past the frost, but a plant like that should still have some new potatoes in the ground, which will be fantastic to harvest. And because they were slow, I thought, well, I'll get some snow peas going as well, which is growing on this trellis here. Now, if I'd given it a little bit more thought, I might have put my potato and snow pea trellis bed into this bed here. I do find that this structure here, in the morning when the sun's just come up, shades this area. Although it's in full sun now, it does miss out on a little bit of that sunshine it could have had if it had been in this position here. So it's good to give a little bit of thought to structures like this and the impact of their shade on other gardens. I did get that bed established a lot sooner than this, so that's why that's done so well. But if you were to build them at the same time, then that bed might have struggled with this here. So down the track, I think I'll be moving the trellis to that end bed so that it's not going to impact any future plantings. But this is just starting to produce some beautiful snow peas. Now just in this bed here I have some more pumpkins growing which I'll be harvesting soon, but right in the middle of it I've got a volunteer cabbage. I wasn't sure what sort of brassica it was to start with, but it is starting to form a head now. Now just here I've got my carrot patch with quite mature carrots in it, and it's actually starting to finish off. You can see the leaves are looking yellow and starting to die off, and some of the carrots are starting to split. So I really need to get moving with these carrots. I do have a second bed just over the other side of the garden with very small young carrots, so they should be great going into winter. But I'll be able to use some of this for preserving. But today I'm going to harvest it and show you how to make my spicy carrot soup. I do like to loosen the ground around the carrots before I pull them out, because I do find they kind of snap off if I don't do that. Oh, see, snap that one off. All these little short stubby ones. That one's okay. And probably just one more. Beautiful. Now make sure I just push the soil in around the remaining plants so that they continue to grow. Well, that's the end of my garden tour. I'm going to head into the house now and make some carrot soup. So if you're interested in seeing that, hang around to the end of the video. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching, and bye for now.